just introduce myself and also my organization before I start. I'm the director of AWARD. AWARD is the African Women in Agriculture Research and Development. It's a program that's hosted at the World Agroforestry Center in Nairobi. And AWARD was founded in 2008 as a career development program, fellowship program that aimed to widen the pipeline of powerful, capable, confident, influential African women scientists in leadership in the ARD sector in Africa. And of course, we were doing this to respond to the underrepresentation of women in the ARD sector. And I think if you look at AGRF, you know that our job is not done, right? You've seen that we really need to increase the number of influential women in leadership positions. So what we've done at AWARD is we've developed a career development training workshops, fellowships, where we build skills in leadership, we build skills in mentorship, and also skills in how to increase your visibility and networks for the women leaders that we work with. And before joining AWARD, I was leading the gender work at FAO, supporting governments and stakeholders to integrate gender in their policies, in their programs and strategies. So if you know FAO, you know that for sure this topic is very, very close to my heart. So I'm very excited to be moderating. So let me tell you a little bit about the session. First of all, the session is going to explore the challenges and implications of accessing nutritious foods for men, for women, for boys, girls, their communities, etc. It focuses on affordability, availability, accessibility, cultural considerations that contribute to the cost of a healthy diet. And I'm very pleased with our speakers and panelists. I've spoken to almost all of them in the few minutes we were planning. And I am quite sure, number one, they are global experts, but they are also practitioners, they are government leaders, and they are really going to bring a lot of wealth to the discussions here today. And they'll be looking at the complex relationship between food prices, dietary choices, gender inequalities, and health outcomes. It is my hope that the session will shed light on the barriers facing men and women, girls and boys in accessing nutritious foods. We also hope that the session will highlight strategies and interventions, including policy options and innovative approaches for increasing access, availability, and affordability of nutritious foods. And finally, by emphasizing the importance of affordable and accessible healthy food options, the session is going to we hope to inspire some collaboration amongst the people who are here, amongst our audience, also amongst the panelists themselves. It's a 2-hour session starting from now, and I'm so pleased that we started in time. We're going to have a keynote speaker who will talk to us a little bit about some of the key issues and really frame the conversation for us. We're hoping to have His Excellency Ruben Mtolo Piri, the Minister for Agriculture in Zambia. We wait and hope he joins us. He's also going to make some framing remarks. And then we'll have the first panel. The first panel will focus on access and affordability. And the second panel will focus on inclusive diets and a lot of examples from the field. And I'll talk a little more about each of those before we have them. So let me make some framing remarks before I hand over to Stamlake. So the State of Food Security and Nutrition report, the 2021 report, indicated that the high cost of healthy diets, coupled with persistent high levels of income inequality, put healthy diets out of reach for around 3 billion people, especially the poor, in every region of the world in 2019. The same report in 2022 indicated that almost 3.1 billion people could not afford a healthy diet in 2020. This is 112 million more people in 2019, and it was reflecting the inflation in consumer food prices that came from the economic impacts of COVID-19 pandemic and the measures put in place to control it. So, in 2023, the same report, this time focusing on urbanization, says more than 3.1 billion people in the world were unable to afford a healthy diet in 2021. You can see the pattern, yeah? These are the issues we want to talk about. Why? Why is it we are not making progress in this area? I should also say I'm a gender expert, so I always want everybody to pay attention to the gender issues in their conversations. And what all these reports, the three of them said, there's a gaping gender gap in food security and nutrition. And each of these reports says that globally, women are more food insecure than men. And we also know that the gender gap in food insecurity widened substantially under the shadow of the COVID-19 pandemic. In Africa, what the report says is that healthy diets remain out of reach for many Africans. This has serious implications, of course, on the entire food system, the health sector. And the affordability of healthy diet is becoming more critical in households living in peri-urban, but also in rural areas, because many of them rely on food purchases. And this actually came in the 2023 report. So our speakers are going to speak to these complex issues, and I really want to thank them today for helping us unpack this crucial issue, crucial but very complex issue. And thank you, everyone. So for our keynote speaker, Stanley, you have a floor. Stanley Samkange is Senior Director, Strategic Partnerships in the World Food Program, and he served in many, many positions within the World Food Program. I'll welcome Stanley. Over to you. Let's give him a clap.
Thank you, Susan, and thank you to colleagues who are joined here for what is really a very important discussion. It's important that we're even talking about this issue, the cost of a healthy diet, because it emphasizes the move of the discussion away from a focus just on bulk calories to a focus on nutrition. But it's a very complex discussion. That's why we have two panels to unpack the issues. It's an issue that can't be solved just by any one thing. It's not, it can't be solved by increasing availability only. Can't be solved by increasing incomes only. And it can't just be solved by education only. But these are the three components, and these are the three components that I'd like to just emphasize and highlight to frame the discussion today. But it's moving pieces also related to a broader global discussion that I would say is moving beyond issues of food security, which has been the traditional way in which things have been discussed, to an issues of food sovereignty. And this is very much a discussion that is linked to the difference between food security and food sovereignty. So that's why it's a complex issue, it's a complex discussion. Of course, a nutritious diet is not always accessible. Foods necessary for a nutritious diet may not be available or convenient. They may not be culturally appropriate. A nutritious diet often costs more than a staple-based diet. And in many instances, the minimum cost of a nutritious diet is above the affordability for many people. The Fill the Nutrient Gap study, which is often referred to. This is joint work, WFP, but FAO, IFAD, UNICEF, WHO. Studies differentiate between the minimum cost of a diet meeting nutritional needs of a staple-based diet and highlighting the affordability of each diet and suggesting potential interventions such as fortified foods, agriculture system enhancements, and social assistance programs. As our moderator mentioned, in 2021, more than 3.1 billion people couldn't afford a healthy diet, which was an increase of 134 million from pre-COVID levels in 2019. One impact of the increased prevalence is, of course, high stunting rates. This continues to be a problem, especially in Africa, but globally. But stunting is only one measure and one impact of the inability to afford a healthy diet. It's a very important one, but it's not the only one. And this is also part of why addressing this issue is both important but also complicated. The Fill the Nutrient Gap study in Tanzania in 2016 found that a nutritious diet was 2.5 times more expensive than a diet only meeting energy needs, and that 59% of households wouldn't be able to afford the nutritious diet. The analysis recommended and modeled the impact of several interventions to improve affordability of a nutritious diet, including maize fortification, kitchen gardens, and cash transfers. Unsurprisingly, the Fill the Nutrient Gap analysis found the situation to be particularly difficult in fragile countries and fragile settings. The issue of availability is a very important one to address, and availability is availability both of traditional staple crops, but also availability of more nutritious foods. But you have to have both. If you don't have the basic staple crops, if those are unaffordable, you're not going to be able to have an affordable, nutritious diet. Likewise, if you only have staple crops, but you don't have vegetables, proteins, and other things to give you a nutritious diet, you're not going to be able to meet the cost of a healthy diet. So you need both components. Also, something that is increasingly being emphasized, I'm sure many of you are aware, this is the International Year of Millet. So in addition to staple crops, it's having more nutritious staple crops is also part of the of what is required. Private sector can play a critical role in creating both the innovations, but also the mechanisms and the incentives for achieving a healthy and nutritious diet. One thing that many countries have done, it's not just to be able to have products that are healthy, but it's the marketing of them. In India, for example, we were there for G20 meetings. They're emphasizing millet, but then they have a whole strategy and a program of marketing millet. They produce millet pizza, millet biscuits. People need to understand these are available, they're more nutritious, and the marketing and education, I think, should be regarded as an integral part of the discussion. Of course, affordability is a critical part. It's why availability is not enough. Increasing, we saw, and this is part of the impact of the high food prices and COVID, that food may be available in the markets, but people can't afford it. And if they can't afford it, maybe they can afford the least nutritious things or things that are lower in nutrition. So affordability is critical. It's why you can't achieve food security if people don't have jobs. You know, we're the World Food Program, but we focus on it. The important thing is not to give people food, it's to have people be able to be independent, self-sustaining, to be able to afford a nutritious diet. That means people have to have jobs. That means economic growth has to be there and emphasized. That's why you can't de-link hunger from poverty. They go together. That's why those are SDGs 1 and SDG 2. Lastly, I just want to emphasize the importance, and by the way, that's also why social protection programs are so important, because often this can help fill the gap, the affordability gap, when you're talking about the cost of a healthy diet. But just transferring cash to people without proper nutrition habits or proper education, actually we've seen that doesn't help. In fact, in many ways, it can exacerbate the problem. If people have bad nutrition habits, they have bad nutrition education, you give them more money, they spend it on things that actually don't promote a nutritious diet. They promote, this is why you see many bad nutrition phenomena, the overweight and nutrient gaps in many high-income countries. So that's the third component. You have to have availability, you have to have affordability, but you also have to have education. People need to want a nutritious diet. Even in high-income countries, even when nutritious commodities are available, many people are not having a healthy diet. It's not because it's not available, it's not because it's not affordable, it's because they don't have the nutrition habits that lead you to a healthy diet. And these components need to be looked at together. So that's why this issue is complicated. There's no one solution to it. It requires all three of these elements to be in place. And in the meantime, it is linked to this broader discussion of food security versus food sovereignty. And I just want to close with an example kind of what that means. I was last week in Brazil. We were talking about some of the indigenous communities in the Amazon. They had had drought in a particular area, and there was an entity that had been delivering food assistance, of course not WFP, to these people in the Amazon. But what they were delivering was pasta, they were delivering rice. They were not delivering the food commodities that actually the people ate and wanted to eat. That's food security, but it's not food sovereignty. And increasingly, food sovereignty must be part of the global discussion. That means a focus on indigenous crops, and that leads you to healthy diets. So let me stop there. Thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to a very interesting discussion.
Thank you so much, Stamlek Samkange, for really laying out the key issues for us. And I think there's a true key message for us here with your three areas of, well, first of all, just saying it's a complex issue and that we really need the three together. We need to think about availability, affordability, and education. And I also really like what you've raised around food sovereignty versus food security, and also the example that you give. I think it lays it out openly very well. So thank you very much. One more clap. So, okay. So what we're going to do then, we're going to move on with our panel discussion. And what I'll do is I'll call each of you to the stage. I'm going to start with Dr. Grace Elias Magembe. She's a Deputy PS, Ministry of Health in Tanzania. Please, welcome. Dr. Obai Khalifa, Deputy Director, Africa, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Director of Agriculture Development. Welcome. Professor Joachim von Braun, professor at the Center for Development Research, Bonn University, and also AGRA board member. Welcome. And finally, Mr. Emmanuel Ampadu, co-founder and chief operating officer, Pure and Just Company Ghana. Welcome. Thank you very much to our panelists. And what I'll ask is, I'll give you about 6 or so minutes to make your intervention. And then we'll see how it goes. After that, we may be able to take 1 or 2 questions from the audience, depending on how we handle the timing. And then we'll have a final closing remarks. So, and I'll ask each of you to introduce yourselves as you make your intervention. I'm going to start with Professor Joachim von Braun. And my question to you is this: what is the actual cost of a healthy diet? And why would taking a food systems perspective help in addressing some of those challenges? Professor von Braun, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good morning. Microphone works? Yes. I'm from Bonn University in Germany. I'm an agriculture economist, also working on nutrition issues, and I'm a member of the board of AGRA, the organizer of this wonderful AGRF. I'm really grateful for the opening keynote from Mr. Sankange that laid out the complexities of the topic before us. There are numbers around. What does it cost to eat a healthy diet? There are floating numbers on Africa. Rural areas, $3, about that. Urban areas, about $5 a day for a healthy diet. But when it comes to nutrition, an average person does not exist. There are babies, infants, pregnant women, men working in offices or in the field, there are the aged, and so on. So healthy diet is a complex issue to keep in mind. Let me give you the definition which leading nutritionists delivered for the Food Systems Summit, the United Nations Food Systems Summit. A group of nutritionists in the Scientific Advisory Committee, which I was chairing for the summit, came up with these carefully crafted words. A healthy diet is health promoting and disease preventing. It provides adequacy without excess of nutrients and health-promoting substances from nutritious food and avoids the consumption of health-harming substances. That's a mouthful, isn't it? You tried to write with me? No. Look it up. But that's how it is. It's a complex issue. Health-promoting and disease-preventing. Let me not reread it again. You find it in the publications of the scientific group. However, as I said, to inform policy, we need to distinguish people by age, sex, life stage, and culture matters. FAO and WHO have formulated standards, food-based dietary guidelines. I refer to those. So we are not starting from scratch when we discuss this. But let me come to costs. Cost estimates matter. The world has currently a number of very serious hotspots of food crisis. And those who deliver food aid and cash transfers in these areas are currently not having the means to deliver even survival diets. the news from WFP, from Afghanistan, for instance, and from Syria-Turkey border area is just this week, is an example. Same applies to parts of Sudan and other areas in Africa, Somalia, Ethiopia. So costs matter, not only the affordability at household level, but also at agency level. But still, let me share with you a few estimates that relate to the costs of a healthy diet. After all, this is the title, Susan, which you have given us here. Yeah. So low-income estimates, low-income people pay for a healthy diet between $1 and $2 per person per household. So this is a vegetarian legume grain diet. A more balanced one with fruits, vegetables, protein is quickly at $3 to $5 per person. And in urban areas of Africa, these are African figures, they exceed quickly $5. So, but I cannot emphasize enough to not take these cost estimates too seriously. They need to be disaggregated by people and by household composition and so on. Let me come to a second point. What is the cost of an unhealthy diet? Not of a healthy diet. What's the cost of an unhealthy diet? The indirect cost of food systems and the cost of not having access to a healthy diet are very high. We economists, Ishmael, we call this the opportunity cost of an unhealthy diet. So I point to Ishmael Sunga because we just talked about that while waiting for this session. The world consumers, so all of us, not only in this room but beyond, the 8 billion people, pay annually 9 trillion, not billion, trillions is thousands of billions, 9 trillion for food. We have figured out that unhealthy diets may cost about 11 trillions per annum in human health costs, not factoring in human suffering in health costs. Of course, the first step to correct these so-called externalities, the indirect costs, is to do true cost accounting. So this health cost of about 11 trillion, and these are rough estimates, you find them in the documents of the scientific group for the UN Food Systems Summit. If you divide 11 trillion by 8 billion people, you come roughly to $4 a day. The costs of the unhealthy diets in the world are about the same as the cost of a healthy diet, average rural urban Africa. Isn't that strange? We could have a zero-sum theoretically. Yeah, the professor speaks theory. Forgive me for the moment. Theoretically, we would have a zero-sum game overcoming the costs of unhealthy diet by facilitating healthy diet to people. What needs to be done? I'm sure we come to that in our discussions. We need to ask ourselves, how does the cost of healthy diet relate to wages and farmers' incomes and facilitate affordability, as our keynote speaker said already. But we also need behavioral change. We need behavioral change so that people are seeking healthy diet at affordable costs. The two Nobel laureates in economics, Akerlof and Schiller, argue that we all have a monkey on our shoulder who whispers in our ears, eat that fatty, sugary food. Eat that sugary, fatty food. Well, our brain is programmed for that. It's no laughing stock. That monkey exists virtually. So It must not be exploited by food industry with high processed food, which is part of the obesity problem, which was already mentioned. And lastly, I want to emphasize, not only because you are sitting next to me, Susan, how can women's time cost of meal preparation for healthy diets be reduced, because these are high costs, time costs or real costs. The transformation of the whole cooking regime, and especially in rural Africa, to electrification is absolutely essential to come to a healthy diet in the households. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Is it still on? Yeah. Hello? Yep. Hello? Okay. So thank you very much. I think he deserves a better clap than that, surely. They are called words of wisdom from, if you were in Kenya, I would call you Mzee Joaquin von Braun. Thank you so much. And thank you for the very complicated definition that I know nobody here captured, but if they need to, they'll know where to find it. I'm also really taken by what you talk about, the cost of an unhealthy diet. It's really a call to action, that we cannot wait because it's going to cost so much more for us to take care of unhealthiness. So thank you so much. And of course, thank you for raising the issue of women's time in terms of preparing food. And actually, I talked to some of the speakers today, and they will be talking about this in this very panel. So thank you so much. Let me go to my second speaker, Dr. Grace Elias Magembe, the Deputy Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Health. She's here representing the Honorable Umi Ale Mwalimu, the Minister for Health. So my question to you is this: how can we make nutritious food more affordable, available, and accessible? And since we've been hearing that Tanzania has a big focus on women and youth, how do we make sure that all this is available, accessible, affordable for women and youth? Over to you.
Thank you, moderator. Good afternoon. So let me start by thanking you for inviting us for this very important forum or discussion as far as the well-being and the future of the African region is concerned. And just like the previous speakers have already said, we understand that meeting new nutritional requirements is key for prevention of malnutrition. But again, the economic access to nutritious food is another story completely. So availability of food does not really translate into affordability and accessibility. The food could be available, but for some reasons it's not accessible, it's not affordable. But again, I want to elude what the previous speakers talked about. In Africa, you're talking about almost 70 to 80%. We eat our staple food, okay? But again, because this is what is available in our environment. But most of them are energy only. So we kind of end up eating one type of food, which is lacking other micronutrients. And that is very common for the poor and the very poor. So what can be done in terms of improving that accessibility? Again, going back to the context in Africa. One is really having home gardens within our environment. Because Africa, we have land. But what is the land being used for? And again, there are sometimes the accessibility to land, there are also gender issues coming in, because there are cultures that do not allow women to own land. So the land could be there, but really as a woman, you do not have access to it. So if we could go for those kitchen gardens and grow foods that are rich, okay, in micronutrients, including fruits and vegetables, that could also be one of the intervention in terms of addressing accessibility. But again, looking at Tanzania now, we have approximately about 4 million people who could really engage in small farming. But that accessibility to land that I talked about is an issue, and majority being women and young people. So they rely on getting their food from food markets. So actually, if you look in urban areas, but also in rural areas, food markets have become very famous in terms of providing the needs, in terms of providing food to the communities. But that is also affected by other factors. For instance, where is this food market located? Sometimes it's located somewhere very far from where people can reach it or can access it, or transporting food from where it is being produced to the market, maybe the costs are very high. So there comes another issue of the price. The food is there, the market is there, but the price becomes a hindering factor. So, and then affordability, we all understand that in terms of highly nutritious food, we talk of poultry products, like meat, like chicken, eggs, milk, meat, fish, but those are the most expensive ones. Very few people can afford those kind of food. And on average in Tanzania, we are saying that the cost of accessing nutritious food is 2 to 3 times higher or expensive than accessing maybe an energy-only food. So those issues on the price also influence the choices that people do make in terms of accessing nutritious food. And the other thing is, what now can we do to improve that affordability? One, everybody has talked about our local foods. I think it's high time that we see how do we make whatever is available within the African context nutritious. Because we can't really start thinking of food varieties that are not within our region, that majority of the people cannot access. So I think improving access to locally available foods is very key, and we can also do this by improving our strategies in terms of processing, but also preserving that food. Because there are times there's plenty of rain, and then within 1-2 seasons there is a drought. So if we could take this food, process it, and keep it for future use, that was really going to address the whole issue of affordability and accessibility in the African context. We shouldn't forget about food fortification. Okay, actually staple food fortification. We can still do that. In Tanzania, we're doing that with maize and some other cereals, but also cooking oil. We're also doing that. But we also have, I talked about the market-based intervention, which also relies on cash transfer. Now we have the poor and the very poor. What do we do about them? In Tanzania, under the leadership of our president, Honorable Samia Suluhu Hassan, we have what we call the Tanzania Social Security Fund that is allocated for the people who are very poor and the poor. And what it does, it supports them in terms of accessing food, but also education for their children, and also other health, of course, and health. So this cash transfer has really, to a certain extent, addressed the whole issue of accessing nutritious food among the poor and the very poorest. But I must admit that it's not enough. Yeah, it's just catering for a proportion of the population. So, so in terms of in terms of how do food prices and dietary choices affect public health outcomes? I think that's what really I would love to talk about, being a medical doctor, because we are hustling. I must say, as a country, we are hustling. So it's very common, and health food, non-nutritious food, is very cheap. If you just walk outside this building here, across the road, you'll find a lot of food kiosk. Okay, what they sell is French fries and eggs, and there's ketchup. We call it tomato sauce. There's ketchup there, which has sugar. And there's table salt you just add. So you can imagine what you're taking there is salt, fat, meaning oil, with a monkey. And while you're taking that, actually that will be accompanied with an exciting feeling of a big soda, 1-2 liters. So what comes out of there, the salt, this will translate into hypertension. The lipids, these will be converted into blood lipids, your heart, the cardiac, and then diabetes and other complications. In Tanzania currently, about 30 to 35% of causes of death is from non-communicable diseases. And most of these non-communicable diseases are food or dietary related. And that is putting a lot of pressure on our national budget because most of the people do not have health insurance. So how do you manage them? And these NCDs are chronic illnesses. So it's not like a disease of 2 days and you're healed. No, you continue having it. So it becomes like a vicious cycle. So in conclusion, what I want to say is when you're talking about affordability, accessibility, and availability, in order for us to improve that and to make sure that our communities have access to dietary, to nutritious diets, one, there is an issue of improving the availability, as I talked about, the whole issue of transportation, transport sector, making sure that the costs are very low so that people can access it in the markets, et cetera, but also conditional currency transfer, but land issues and gender, addressing gender issues. But there's an issue of implementation of public health interventions. In Tanzania, this has really been one of the ways that has brought a lot of changes in terms of reducing malnutrition, but also stunting, et cetera, fortification of food, but providing supplements such as iron, sulfate, folate for pregnant women, as well as vitamin A for children under 5. And we shouldn't forget about creating awareness to the communities. What does it mean by a health or a nutritious diet? And physical fitness. It's not about eating and sitting. Whatever you eat has to be consumed. If it's not being consumed, it will definitely be stored somewhere. And that will lead into other health calamities. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Magembe, for, well, first of all, giving us examples of what's happening in Tanzania and telling us, also giving us examples of some of the strategies that you're using here in Tanzania to address the lack of nutritious foods. And I really like your example of putting to a good example of what it means, the cost of an unhealthy diet. Yeah, I think your example was extremely clear, and of course we were able to use the little monkey as the one that makes us all have these poor choices when we could have had better choices. So thank you so much. So I'll go to my next panelist, Dr. Obai Khalifa. Dr. Obai, I would like you to talk a little bit about the important role of small-scale farmers in ensuring access to nutritious and healthy diets, and how can we support them in that? Over to you.
So, I don't know if you can hear me. Let me get closer. Thank you very much, Susan. My name is Obai Khalifa, and I work with Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And I strongly believe that increasing access to healthy and nutritious diet will not happen if we do not focus on providing continuous support to small-scale producers. Because basically they produce most of our food, and they are really the backbone of our food chain in general. But the question is, how do we do that without making sure that they have access to innovation in an equitable way and in a sustainable way, so that they continue playing this role that they are supposed to play? And one reason, or the main reason, that we see prices are really increasing tremendously now in response to global shocks in general is because of the fact that small-scale producers or local farms, they are not really able to to cope with the demand that is increasing also tremendously in our geographies. So maybe just sharing a few insights or examples of how we can tackle that and some of the successes that we have seen and the progress that has been made. So number one, we have seen that there was a huge kind of over-reliance on a very narrow portfolio or group of food staples globally in terms of research. So expanding the diversity of crop varieties in general would change the picture. And luckily, we have seen this is happening. We have seen a lot of farmers today embracing new varieties or improved varieties of traditionally very popular African crops. So we have one story, which is a story of the next-gen cassava, for example. So the work that has been done in breeding next-gen cassava and really focusing on innovation, and again, this is for you, Susan, is really driven by the preferences of female as well as male farmers and consumers. So, so again, this is a story which tells us that it is possible actually to innovate within the local African crops which are historically neglected by commercial farms in the commercial breeding companies in general, in a way that productivity has stagnated. And we have not been able to respond to increasing kind of infestation with pests and also the climate change and all of that. So this picture now is changing. And this applies also to other crops like millet, like sorghum, like yam, etc. Another, obviously, I mean, all of this is work of the CG system in collaboration with many of the national research centers. So, so this is something we're really very glad that it's happening. The other point I would like to make here is that we have another very good example, which is the orange-fleshed sweet potato. So the story here is that it's not just by focusing on the upstream work. We need to focus on upstream, but we also need to focus on the whole value chain, how to really benefit all players in the value chain. We all know, I mean, the orange-fleshed sweet potato, it's quite rich with vitamin A, and small serving every day really goes a long way, especially in terms of meeting the child's requirements for vitamin A. It's also very attractive for farmers because it can do very good harvest in situations where we face huge problems with maize, for example. But the real innovation that I'm very excited about, that what has happened is when we started seeing the benefits with the commercial baking and baby food operations, so with a puree of sweet potato, and this has tremendously improved the nutritional content of bread, of cakes, and reduced the need for wheat flour. So again, conclusion here is that we do not talk about innovation just in terms of upstream to increase access to nutritious and healthy diet, but we have to think about the whole value chain. The other thing we need to think about is also climate change. I mean, the varieties we have available, as I said before, we have some models, climate models, which tells us that many parts of Africa are not going to be suitable for bean production. So to be able to increase the focus on bean varieties which are pest resistant, drought resistant, heat resistant, we needed to do a lot of work also with CG. And thanks to that, now we have more than 450 new varieties specifically for African farmers. And again, this is something which is still ongoing. But you know, to Daktari, I think the point also about markets, it's very important. I think we always talk about markets, thinking about markets serving the consumer. But one thing we should not forget is that when we talk about poverty, we talk primarily about small-scale producers. And those are the people who are mostly affected by the lack of access to nutritious and healthy diet. So whenever there is a problem with the market, so if the market is not diversified, if the market is not really incentivizing them also and rewarding them for investing in quality inputs, then they are going to be the ones who are the first to fall in terms of not having proper access to nutritious diet. So we need to think about different ways how we can innovate in the ways markets are structured to get the markets to work for those people who are the custodians of our food and our supply chains. The other important point is livestock. So all the examples I have been talking about are related to agriculture, but livestock are essential in terms of providing macronutrients which are not to be found anywhere else. Talking about animal source protein in general. So the main challenge we are facing with livestock is that it is misunderstood. It's hugely underfunded, even compared to agriculture, which is already underfunded. And in a way, if we are able to innovate in animal genetics, in animal health, in animal nutrition, in general, and also in terms of market access, we will be able to change the picture completely. One example is what we see here also in Tanzania is access to, through innovation in animal genetics, to new breeds of poultry, like what we call the dual-purpose poultry. So this is, again, tremendously improving the ability of chicken to resist local conditions, similar to local breeds, but at the same time to increase the productivity tremendously in terms of laying eggs and yield. Last point is going to be about the focus from policy as well. So we have to make sure that we are incentivizing our small-scale producers to produce for quality. So if the markets are going to be designed in a way that it would reward quality and it pay per quality, then the picture would also change in terms of how small-scale producers would be able to focus on producing quality outputs. And at the same time, we have to think also of the policy environment which would enable us to engage more and more private sector, not just in terms of bringing innovation to the small-scale producers, but also in terms of market integration for small-scale producers. I'll stop there, Susan. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm quite sure he deserves a better clap than that. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for bringing up the role of the science, the research that we need to support smallholders to get to a healthy diet. I think it's really important, the raising around diversity of our crops, traditional African crops, and the kind of breeding we can improve around that. The orange flesh, sweet potato, very well-known example. Again, really important to look at all the players in the value chain, the climate change issue, livestock, and the kind of breeding needed, but also the role of policy. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
So now, my last panelist here is Emmanuel Ampadu. Emmanuel, I know you run a small company, so this question, you're going to give us some really good examples of, I hope you can give us some really good examples of how food production and distribution can be more innovative, but also more equitable. And how do we make sure we can reach the most vulnerable, especially women and children? Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Thank you, first of all, to AGI for this opportunity. My name is Emmanuel Ampadu, like she said, and I run an agro-processing company. We say we are women-led because we employ 70% women. Because we believe when I started this business way from college, the farmers we were working with were all male. So if the male are producing, then the women should add value. And then also we say we are climate smart because we try not to have a lot of waste. We actually use the fruit peels to generate gas to dry the fruit, which produce fertilizer to grow the fruit. And then also we say we are youth driven because we are all below the age of 35. It's an honor to be here, and hearing all the professionals, I just want to go onto the ground and be real. I believe that with regards to innovation and the cost of a healthy diet that we are talking about, it has something to do with we the young people as well. Surprisingly, in Ghana currently, only 5% of young people are involved in agriculture and agribusiness. And we are talking about bringing out all these problems. I remember when I was in university, when we started our company all the way in university, you talk to students, and most young people don't even care where their food is coming from, talk less of how healthy it is. So we have a lot of job to do, from young people caring about where their food comes from, how it is grown, and then how it can benefit them health-wise. I would like to talk about your question, innovation. Often when we talk about innovation, we talk about something very sophisticated. We think about a sophisticated way of doing things. We dry fruits. We dry mango, pineapple, papaya, and pawpaw using a dehydrator. We've created a biogas system that gives fertilizer for farmers to even grow the fruits that we dry. We communicate with farmers all the time. We are realizing problems that are kind of different from the textbook problems that we define. These are more real-life problems. For example, you give a farmer free organic fertilizer. Even for them to come for it is a problem, because they can buy a weedicide or another fertilizer, synthetic, that they know when they put on the fruit, they are just ready to go. So we have an opportunity for we, the young people coming, to get into the sector, to think about solutions. It doesn't matter which sector you are in, whether IT, finance, so that we can all get involved in our food production that will help us impact whether it is healthy or not healthy and the cost thereof. It is very, very important for us. Now, so at our factory, because we are all young people, we make use of technology a lot. We are data-driven. So we take a lot of data. We realize that the way our parents used to do business doesn't work anymore. Now we take a lot of data to make informed decisions and not just guesswork. So when we source fruit from farmers, we come to the factory, we process, we communicate back to the farmers the trends we are finding in terms of food production. Don't use too much fertilizers. The mangoes are too sweet. It's early season mangoes. They are too sweet. Maybe you should force this way. Maybe you should not force this way. You should fertilize this way. And we get back to them to give them that information. Now, why would the farmer take our information seriously if the cocoa processing farmer has never even tasted chocolate before? It becomes a big problem. So you give them the dried fruit, you show them this mango that was done this way with this method tasted this way. This one that was done this way with this method did not taste this way. It is very alarming that you have people processing fruits, growing fruits that have not tasted the value we've added to those fruits before. And so I'm happy that you spoke about the farmers below the value chain, because we talk about it and sometimes they are the poorest, So if they don't have experience with this value-added products, which most of them are healthy, our products are natural, no additives, how are they going to understand the production of the food? Then we also focus a lot as an organization. I'm being practical based on what I know. As an organization, we also focus a lot on our employees. So we employ women, and we spoke about the fact that women are the ones who cook. Women are the ones who understand this. And in employing the women, they started giving us ideas like, why don't we do factory tours in the factory, where we invite schools, kids in the rural areas to come to the factory to understand how their food is grown, to understand the processes that the dried fruit goes through. And I think this is a wonderful education. So if just last 2 weeks, we had between 2 to 9-year-old children coming, and they asked very intelligent questions. Some of them haven't even seen pineapple before. So talk less of whether it is healthy or not healthy, what combination should I put together to get a healthy diet. When they see these things, they see how they are being processed, it does not only enrich their experience as they are growing up, but it also gives them interest in venturing into some of these things. I always say that why should we be in Africa and we cannot produce our own food and define our own healthy diet and trade amongst ourselves here? That will, I believe, will reduce the cost a lot. Because if we are employing our raw materials or focusing on taking our food outside of Africa for them to add value to it and bring it back to us, then it's going to constantly be very expensive. But if we find means and ways of working, for example, mangoes is seasonal. And when Ivory Coast season starts, Ghana season follows, then you go to Burkina, then you go to Togo, then you are going to Mali. Why can't we have mangoes all year round dried? We serve our dried fruit in Emirates. They add it to the pack. We go to various schools, they add it to their lunch. Just drying it, being able to work amongst ourselves in the West African region can reduce my cost drastically. I could sell it for probably 10 cents, and it could be in the lunch or diet of most schools in Ghana. Finally, I want to talk about distribution, so I don't talk too much. I normally get passionate, so I begin to talk a lot. So distribution. I think government should incentivize retailers to start stocking made in Africa or made in Ghana stuff. There is no incentive for that. So you realize that we are processing and we are focusing on export because I need a foreign exchange to help my business grow and employ more people. And there is no incentive. Recently, a survey was done in Ghana, and 96% of goods in the various supermarkets are imported. They are foreign owned. And some of us can't even see how they do it. But once they write natural and healthy, we say, hey, this is healthy. But we can produce ours here. We talk about, what's the name? The people in the rural communities, women, children, having access to some of these things. It's because government is not intervening in making sure that government supports me to reduce my unit cost, to be able to go to the rural area to give them some of the natural tropical dried fruit that I grow. So that becomes very difficult. So unless it's Christmas, Easter, or we are organizing farmers to come to the facility, they don't get some of these healthy diets. So we have a long way to go, but I'll conclude and say that the young people should get involved. We should get involved in any way on how we grow, how we process, and how we distribute our food. We have, coming to this conference, I've interacted with people, wonderful, innovative ideas, and the future is bright. But we can't just talk. We need to start acting. How can the farmer hear this? How can more young people hear this? How can they get into the sector? And that is how I believe we can reduce the cost of a healthy diet for Africans so that Africans can consume. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Emmanuel. I think your presentation has put into context everything we've discussed here. And then, of course, it's really important that you've shown the role of youth and how different they are when they are farmers or when they open businesses. And we do need to have the voice of youth, and we do need to have youth actually participating in agriculture. And I see very clearly that you can actually address, reduce the cost of food. So thank you so much. Clap. So, thank goodness. So we are able to take 2 questions from the audience. I'm going to ask whoever puts up their hand and wants to ask to be very brief so that we have time. I see one hand there. Doreen. There's one hand here, and there was one hand over there. Brevity.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Revocatus Kimario. I'm the Executive Director of Sugeko in Tanzania. I'm happy that I have this opportunity and the Deputy Permanent Secretary is here. When it comes to the question of the cost of healthy food, for me I said, apart from what they have been saying, is because of an awareness. Take for instance, in Tanzania, if you take, for instance, from Magufuli bus stand, we have around 1,000 buses getting out and coming in every day. But if you get into the bus, the clips that are shown in the video in the bus, they don't talk of nutrition, and our people, they don't know. If you have 1,000 bus with 60 people times 30, and the household has 5 people, annually is over 108 million people. They are aware of the nutritional issues. Second,
I'm going to ask you
Yeah.
to summarize, otherwise we'll run out of time.
Second is about the forgotten food.
Yes.
In Africa, we have our own food that we used to eat through our forefathers, but we are not using it. We are embracing the junk food, thinking that this is the nutritious food. How are we going to create awareness so that our people start using the forgotten food and forget about this?
I'm sorry, I'm going. Oh, thank you so much. Excellent questions. I was going to stop you if you went to the third. There was a question over there.
Okay, thank you. My name is Kudzai Nyengirai, Veltunga Hills, Zimbabwe. I wanted to thank the speaker about food awareness. I have the same conversations with the lady who helps me look after my kids. Doesn't see the importance of saving popo and food wastage, so thank you. My question is on dietary guidelines. Someone talked about guidelines being developed for Africa. How do you deal with the ones that are there, not speaking to each other? If you look at the Fat Secret is driven by USDA data. It doesn't speak to the NHA's food nutrition content from UK, and sometimes the discrepancies are high. So how are we dealing with that?
Thank you. Excellent question. If there was one final burning one, I'll take it. One. No, so we'll take one from there. Yeah, just one. But really brief because you're on borrowed time now.
Okay, thank you. So my question goes to actually all speakers, and it's about what do we do as Africans to make sure the technology, the preservation and the processed food, they are not harmful to our health. Talking of trans fat acids, sugar and beverage. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So we have 3 questions. What I'll do is I'll allow each of you to respond to whichever one you wish to, and then please make a parting shot. I'm going to give you only 2 minutes. I'll start with you, Emmanuel. Two minutes.
All right. I would like to talk about the first question. So I like the fact that you were able to realize that buses, one of the things we are realizing is the increase of connectivity, internet, with amongst people. Now people use phones, and that is why I talk about young people coming in the scene, social media influencers. When I was growing up, I'm a bit between Gen Zs and baby boomers. Our generation, we saw cassettes and we are seeing smartphones. And you can see that now there are professions like a YouTuber, a social media influencer. That is why I'm passionate about they getting involved, the influence that they have, the reach that they can drive if we begin to involve them. And I love the fact that you spoke about forgotten food, our heritage. That's why I said, who is defining a healthy diet for Africans? It's very important for me, because I think that there are a lot of things that we have here that we can make use. To end the question, I have an advisor. His name is Kwame Williams, CEO of Moringa Connect, right? He schooled in US. He came down to set up a company where they do Moringa oils and stuff like that. And Moringa was already growing in Ghana. So these are some of the things that we need. Go back to our foods that our forefathers were using, and then add value to it and distribute. Because now for young people, it needs to be fancy. And if it's fancy, they'll buy.
Thank you. Thank you so much for bringing TikTok into the conversation. Dr. Bai, it's your turn.
Thank you very much. So I think probably some of the themes would address all questions simultaneously. I think first about awareness, digitization, I think is going to be key. The role of startups and SMEs, I think in Africa, and this is also related to youth, those are going to be critical in how we are going to increase awareness innovatively. So innovation, again, not talking about upstream, but we are talking about business models, talking about digitization, and the role of that in food markets is going to be critical. And I think I'm very optimistic of how this can actually transform our food chain. 2, about the research data question. I think it's really important for us to start thinking more about contextualizing research and creating these feedback loops to take the incentives or the insights from Africa rather than bringing things off the shelf from upstream that is in another country and trying to apply it to Africa. I think this feedback loop is going to be created again through this kind of, as we call it, innovation by design, really focusing on the consumer preferences. And the example again of the cassava, next-gen cassava, is a very good example because it really incorporates all of that into design upstream. So bridging the gap between upstream and downstream. And I'll stop there.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Over to you, Dr. Magembe.
Yes, thank you. So let me agree with the speaker that really we haven't really been able to tape on the availability of social media and other platforms in terms of creating awareness to the communities. But I'll just give you an example. In Tanzania during the COVID pandemic, I don't know whether it was the fear of death or what, everybody came up, bus owners, media, everybody was there to support the government. So what I'm trying to say, this is a collective responsibility. Let us be ready to use every available opportunity that is there, whether in the public sector or in the private sector. So we'll continue engaging the private sector to do this, but again, they should also be ready, because this is something that has to be a decision that comes from within. We cannot force people, to do it, but I think we'll continue engaging them. Regarding the forgotten foods, our foods, again, that is our responsibility, all of us, starting from the family level. What do we teach our children? Yeah? If you have a pizza and a banana, what will your child go for? They'll go for pizza. So you cannot wait for the government to do that. It has to be you, at an individual or at a family level. Let's start teaching our children the importance of a healthy diet, health eating. Okay, and we have school programs in Tanzania, so we use also that platform in terms of educating our kids. And I believe all of us here are coming from various institutions. Some of us are coming from research and research institutions and training centers. It's time that we as Africans now take the lead in doing research on issues that are really our priority. Okay, so you find their research institutions and they're doing their research in matters that are not really a priority to this continent. So I think this is a task that is ahead of us, all of us. Let us go into addressing issues that are really of priority to the African context, that really can bring change to this continent, including our regulatory authorities. We must regulate what comes in our countries, the food, the medicine, medical devices, they all have to be regulated. So we have the responsibility of strengthening our institutions that are responsible for regulation of food, drugs, etc., etc. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Magembe. And you get the last word, Professor
thank you.
Joachim.
The last peep. There was this question about high processed food or technology and processed food. Not every this is a difficult area. Not every country can have a powerful food and drug association organization. So I would say it would be good if African sub-regions would have strong food and drug organizations certifying the things which we have been discussing and which the State Secretary was emphasizing. We need these institutions. Moreover, agriculture research is progressing well in Africa. Nutrition research not yet at a level, at a desirable level. So, and the two have to come together. The schools of nutrition are very few, and there I think progress can be made. Civil society organizations have a role to play in nutritional improvement, and so it's, yes, government plays a role, corporate and business and small farmer organizations play a role, but civil society organizations as well. Lastly, let me emphasize that we need to look at the tail end of the outcome of good nutrition. We find that puzzle that stunting rates are remaining high even in areas where there is a lot of agricultural production and even agricultural surplus, where a diverse diet is produced. You don't automatically find health progress. Even here in Tanzania, Iringa is an example. The stunting rates are stubbornly high, and it is a beautifully producing agricultural area. So somehow the health work, the public health work from your ministry needs to come together with the agriculture extension work in order to address that. So then maybe good things like whole grain and good school feeding and so on come together. But we have not yet achieved that. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you very much. Let's give our panelists. I need more. So thank you very much, our panelists, for an excellent, insightful conversation. I think we've learned a lot. Everyone who's here has learned something new today. And also thank you for sharing of your experiences. So thank you. Before you leave, we'll take a picture. Please do not leave. We have a second, even more exciting panel, if you can imagine. So please stay. Stanley, come in front so we can take a picture. And I'm going to call my panelists to come in front. I'll start with Ishmael Sunga, the CEO of the Southern African Federation of Agriculture Unions. Actually, it turns out I won't have space to sit anymore, so sit wherever. Okay, the second panelist is Miss Elizabeth Swai, CEO of AKM Glitters Company Limited, Tanzania. Did Grace Mugambi didn't come? Okay. Is it? Okay. All right, the third panelist is Miss Elizabeth Imbo. Elizabeth, come. Elizabeth is a country project manager, nutrition in the city ecosystems, NICE in Kenya. She's working with Syngenta Foundation East Africa. Dr. Luna Chungu, welcome. Dr. Luna is a senior technical advisor, Consenut. And finally, Ms. Betty Kibara. Betty is the director, Food Initiative, the Rockefeller Foundation. I need my microphone. So welcome to my second panel. And here we are going to be tackling the issue of access, inclusive diets. And I'm very excited with this panel because we're going to be hearing very practical elements of things that each of these panelists is doing to make sure that nutritious food is accessible or affordable, or that we're making sure we are reaching some of the most left behind. So I'm going to start with you, Ishmael. So my question to you is, so you're coming from Sakao, the Farmers Union. So what are your perspectives on measuring the cost of a healthy diet? I mean, what would the producer, I would like to hear a little bit of perspective from producer organization. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Susan. It's a bit awkward that I have to shift and face this direction in order to speak to you guys.
Microphone. Where's our microphone?
Maybe waiting for the microphone, I'll still go ahead.
Okay.
Very enlightening conversations earlier on, and I want to build up on some of them. But I'll start with a few reflections that, in my view, might give you a clearer picture of what the situation is, particularly from the producer side. And these may not be connected. There may be different conversations going on. I think the first one. Hello? Hello, can you hear me? Okay. I think the first one really is about, it's quite a sobering thought, or in practical terms, that the majority of farmers, and smallholder farmers for that matter, are the ones that are feeding the world. And that has been proven, that is correct. And at the same time, they are also the segment of society that is most malnourished. So those that are feeding others are themselves going hungry. It's a bit of a very sad, sobering situation. And that means that something is not right. If those that are feeding others are going hungry themselves, that's a bad state of affairs. And tell your own stories from what I'm saying. The second point really for me is quite often when food leaves the farm, it is intact. It has got all its nutrients together. But when it reaches the other end on the plate, it's stripped of all the nutrients. But quite often it is the farmer who gets blamed for that they are not producing nutritious food. And we call it value addition, but nutrition-wise, one could actually call it value stripping in that sense, because it is leaving the farm with everything intact. When it gets to the plate, it is now very deficient of those nutrients. It means something is wrong in that transformation thing, and there's no accountability in the cost that is associated with that wrongness. I think it's a fair point. Maybe I'm doing it too drastically in terms of presenting, but just to illustrate the point that there's something that really needs to be done, not only by the consumer and not only by the farmer. It is something in between that might actually be the elephant in the room. That what is it that we need to do to be able to deal with the matter. There are also issues around the whole of nutrition literacy itself is a major issue. That quite often, me included, I'm not sure that I know what my nutritional requirements are. And if I don't know myself, I wonder whether men would know at the very basic level. And I would want to hazard a guess that most of us don't actually know. The question becomes, what do we do to ensure that there is sufficient literacy in the area of nutrition? And what will be the role of many agencies that are interacting with farmers, including ourselves as farmers' organizations, in trying to ensure that there's that basic understanding and knowledge around it. And if one also reflects further, given that most of them are nutrition ignorant, the question is it for those that are doing agricultural extension and are teaching plant nutrition and are teaching animal health, and yet the human health itself, in the process of teaching plant health and livestock health, you're not talking about at the same time of the health of the person that you're talking to. I'm just wondering whether those can also be agents of change, including those that are providing inputs. Do they have an obligation also to ensure that they enlighten and educate those that are providing the inputs too? Because they're already interacting with them anyway. What obligations do they have to ensure that they also spread the word? Just an idea which we might talk about. The other really is about labeling. Maybe it's basic level. If we know that eating one thing without the other can be harmful, in as much as perhaps drinking or smoking can be harmful, is there a case for a labeling that also says that if you take too much of this in terms of food on its own, without the other accompaniments, I'm just thinking, is that something that could be, what I'm trying to think of, maybe stimulate a discussion of innovative ways around which some of these things can actually be done. I quite like the idea of the thousands of buses that are traveling all the time with television screens and all that. That is quite a novel idea, and there are a lot of institutions that are doing a lot of technological work and other work. I think we can also put a rider on them to carry that obligation of. But talking of the cost, maybe my final point, quite often I'm talking about the cost to the consumer, the final, not the cost to the farmer. It is much more, we are much more concerned about what does it cost to the consumer and not what does it cost to the farmer. I already alluded to some of the costs in terms of health and all that and poverty to the farmer. But it's so fundamental because earlier on I say that farmers are the ones that are the most malnourished. It's a cost issue sometimes to them. And it's also a product of the system that enables us to produce one or two things without taking nutrition into consideration. It talks to the kind of requirement perhaps we need to try and ensure that there is diversity as it is also compatible, if it's compatible with the environmental conditions in that area. My parting word at the moment is that perhaps we're not doing enough of the ABCs of nutrition. And we are flying fairly high without addressing the very fundamentals of what actually is the nutrition diet and how can it come about. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that, Ishmael. I think you raised some interesting and innovative ways to create awareness on better nutrition as well, which I thought, my idea of an input seller when you come to ask about how much fertilizer and then you get some nutrition diet, that's quite an innovative thought. And then the issue around labeling and the cost to farmers. So thank you so much for that intervention. So now I go to Dr. Luna Kiunga. I will let you introduce yourself and also pronounce it better. But let me ask you the question nonetheless. So the question to you is, how can we make healthy diets more affordable, accessible, and available? And again, especially to the most vulnerable. Give us an example from the organization that you run. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you very much. My name is Luna Kiungu.
Kiungu.
Kiungu. And I'm a nutritionist by profession. I'm working with a local NGO in Tanzania, and we are the community people. So I have a lot of experience. So I will start with, the question is wide, but I'll go to the point. We know that there are so many factors that affect accessibility, affordability, but they are divided into two. The first one is income and food prices, but the second one is individual preferences, cultural tradition, and geographical location. So these are the social and economic factors that affect accessibility. When we are trying to promote accessibility and affordability of diet, we really have to we have to talk about gender. I'll talk about it later, but what I'm trying to emphasize here is that we need to review our we need to conduct dietary assessments, and we should specify into gender, age, also cultural or ethnicity group, because if we want really to tackle the problem of malnutrition, it has to be context specific. We have a lot of recommendations on how we are going to deal with malnutrition. My colleagues have talked about the rising or the problem of stunting, and why is it not, we cannot lowering, despite the government's efforts on investing so much in system as well as manpower. We have nutritionists, but the problem is there. What we are lacking is try to tackle malnutrition specifically for that particular people or group of people. For that particular challenge, we need to revise our dietary. We need to assess our diet. We need to come up with very dietary assessment that takes into account social, cultural, economic, even ecological and environmental factors. We also need to address this affordability, availability of food, nutritious food, in terms of trying to improve extension services. So much, we have extension services in the community, but they focus on cash crops. They don't focus on empowering women who are the major producer of food. They don't provide services for production of indigenous foods, which are available in the community. And as the result, we are losing those indigenous foods. We focus on cash crops. When you tell a person today, which I don't know in English, but there is a fruit called tipisi, I don't know, matipisi. And the orange, he will choose orange. And orange is so difficult for that person to access, while there are indigenous foods, especially fruits and vegetables, which are available. So we need to empower these people. We need to empower women. We need to empower them with education. You will be surprised how many, majority of women, they don't even know what is nutritious diet. We still need to educate them. There is a food. I still believe that in the rural community, food is available. How you're going to use this food is another issue. So we need to come up with behavior change, communication approach that try to find out the barriers and the motivators for production as well as consumption of food. We need to find what are the social norms that prevent women from accessing. Why are they producing but they are selling? Why are they not accessing even an egg? Because you find a woman keeping a small animal like chicken, but she cannot even access an egg unless the man of the house tells her that you can access that egg. So we need also to address social norms that prevent a woman from accessing a nutritious diet. Another thing is that we need to do is when we are thinking about technologies, a rural woman doesn't need big technologies. They need small technologies that ensures that maybe she can reduce time for going and fetching woods or for processing food. She needs to know technologies that ensures that if she can process her food, it can last for the whole year. But not these big technologies. These big technologies are taken over by men, even if you introduce them in the rural area. So we need to come up with an innovative way, small technology that are fit for our women, who are the major producers of food. When we are talking about education, as well as social behavior change, I can't live without saying that when we come to advertising nutritious food, or we come up with campaigns for advertising nutritious food, we really need to come up with ways of making this advertisement attractive. And I'll give you an example, like when private sector campaign for highly processed food, they come up with very attractive campaigns that can convince a person that this really is a good, nice, attractive food. we need to borrow a leaf from them. We need to make our campaigns very engaging, aspirational, and memorable. In that way, we can even attract people can be able to hear, can be able to memorize that this is the healthy diet.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. A clap for Ms. Luna Kiungu. And thank you. I think the thing that you've raised that I think is really important is thinking about addressing the social norms that prevent women from accessing nutritious foods. I think that's really important, the behavior change communication as well. And then, of course, thinking about trying to reduce women's time in processing so that they have more time to do other things. So thank you so much. So my next speaker is Ms. Elizabeth Swai. And Elizabeth, my question to you is, what is the role of education in ensuring consumers make informed choices about their diets? And what are some of the ways to address sociocultural considerations that affect choice? And I think your presentation will follow very closely to what Dr.